Tonight, Superboy assumes that you're already reading all of Scott Lobdell's comics for some godforsaken reason. Frankenstein was part of the original Watchmen in DC, in a manner of speaking, and for the love of God, why did no one tell me Penguin Pain and Prejudice was so goddamned good? All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 23 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host, and once again I record this bit after I record all the other comic reviews because it's just easier for me, and I went way over on time because it's 15 comics and I have no sense of how to talk faster. So we're just going to go ahead and hop right into it. Let me tell you what's coming up this week. This week, February 8th, 2012, held the number 6 issues of Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Batwoman, Superboy, Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Legion Lost, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E, Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the number 5 issues of Huntress and Penguin, Pain, and Prejudice. That's the last issue of that miniseries, I found out. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump right into it with our first comic of the week. Batman and Robin number 6, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Patrick Gleason. We left off last issue with Damian being told by nobody to shoot some guy in the head that they were hunting, and the entire issue was also the backstory of how Bruce Wayne got mixed up with the Ducards back during his training days. This issue picks up, still with Damian, gun to the guy's head, and nobody's just philosophically going off on like, oh, true evil does not blah blah blah. So Damian, after a while, straight up, he pulls the trigger with the gun aimed at the guy's head, and when he realizes the shot doesn't fire because it's just not loaded, he goes off on nobody. He's like, I'm not here to play games. He's like, hey, I just need to make sure you're in for the cause. I actually have some questions I need to ask this guy, so we're just going to take him back to our place for some interrogation. So that goes on, and as he's about to knock out the guy, that little like forehead finger poke thing that we've seen over the past 2 issues, I think, nobody's like, okay, so if you do it right here, you can knock him out, okay? Just right there as hard as you can. And he's like, oh, but I could kill him. And he's like, you won't. I have faith in you. I trust you. And he does it perfectly and knocks the guy out. And so Damian's obviously getting some trust points in him because he's willing to show him the stuff that Batman won't. So Batman gets a call from Alfred that they detected somebody that matches Damian's general build on one of the cameras outside of an embassy. Batman busts in and sees that everyone's been beaten but is still alive, and then we get the voiceover narration continuing on with what happened while he was training with the Ducards. And we just see a whole bunch of fighting montages, a bunch of science stuff. Ducards telling him, hey, look, get into the mind of your enemy, become one with them. That is the only way to blah, blah, blah. And we see that they're hunting this terrorist named Hassan, who is going around just senselessly killing people across the globe. And they're tracking him, and sometimes they completely lose his track, sometimes they're right on his heels, but regardless, they've been hunting him for, I think it says years, or at least quite some time. And finally, they get him down to a hotel. They've got some lookout points on a hotel across the street, and Ducard makes his way over to the hotel where Hassan is staying, and he makes his way up to the room, and they're like, yes, we've called the international police, they are on their way, they will arrest him and he will be brought to justice. And Bruce is like, cool. And then he gets over to the door, and Ducard's like, hey Bruce, what is he doing? And he's like, well, he's standing by the door with a gun. And then Hassan just shoots him in the head and kills him. And Bruce is understandably not happy about this because that's not justice, that's killing people. And so they argue, and Bruce ends up storming out. And Ducard tells Morgan that Bruce Wayne is a loose end who has to be tied up. So we see, I think a couple days later, he's heading to the airport, and Morgan, via sniper post, takes a shot and shoots Bruce Wayne. But he was given just a little bit of warning because there was a glint of sunlight that showed Morgan's scope. So then we see what I assume is later that night, where Morgan is driving away and Bruce just drops a cinder block through his driver's side window, busts through the window, starts beating the ever-loving hell out of Morgan, straight up saying how he's going to kill him. But then he stops after a second, and he drops Morgan in through Henry's skylight, and they're never seen again. And that's why Batman was, because he brought him that close to the point of killing. That's why he's so dangerous, because even though he had his moral code, he was this close to doing it. So GCPD arrives at the embassy, and Batman asks Gordon for 2 hours, because this is a personal thing. Gordon gives him 1, and he's like, done. So then we go over to the Gotham Harbor, where nobody's interrogating the dude who has the human trafficking ring going on. And turns out he's not torturing him. Damian thought he was torturing him. Everyone thought he was torturing him. Turns out he's just using truth serum because, as it turns out, fear is not actually that good for getting the truth. Fear will just get an answer, regardless of if they actually know anything. So he prefers, he's still trapping in hostage situation these people, but he uses chemicals and stuff instead of just straight fear. But then once he got everything he needs out of the guy, he starts dangling him over a vat of acid and starts lowering him in the same way he did with that Batman at the beginning. Damian, of course, not a huge fan on this because of the no killing for no particular reason rule. Like, that just seems a bit over the top, dunking in acid. So nobody, he throws a punch at nobody. Nobody seems to knock him out for a second. But Damian does have a little bit of an upper hand, and he activates the GPS signal on his Robin suit so that Batman has a trace on where they are. And he's driving as fast as he can in the Batmobile there. Meanwhile, nobody's like, come on, man. I did that whole trust thing. I thought we were cool. Why would you betray me for that dickwad Batman? And Damian's like, because he's my father, you idiot. Literal quote. And at that point, nobody's like, okay, hey, Batman, I'm assuming that this GPS signal thing allows you to hear what's going on as well, which is a bit of a leap, but regardless, it does. And he purposely says, the next noises you hear will be your son breaking. And then we just get repeated cracking noises followed by, grunts and, stifled screams. And we see Batman gritting his teeth more and more and more before finally on the final page he just screams out Damian. And that's where we leave off. I like this issue. I think it's fine. It's the weird portion where it had to split the time between the end of the Ducard story and the actual Damian bit. I think I would have preferred it be, because this shares it with the last issue that had half Ducard and then half Damian. I think I would have preferred it to be all one issue dedicated to Ducard and all one issue dedicated to Damian. Just because it doesn't feel like either of them get the particular development they really need. It's I don't know. It's the Ducard story feels cut short because it's like, oh, and then he killed a guy. And we're introduced to this guy on the same page where he's shot. So I'm like, okay, I guess that's crossing the line, but it doesn't really feel like it is. But that's also just because I don't have the last issue as present in my mind as I do this one. So overall, I just wish it would have been that. But it's still a very well-told story. Art is still fantastic. I do really like how he showed Damian how to do the forehead thing, because that's just that little touch where he really wanted to learn how to do it. And then nobody's the one who showed him. Just getting that little seed if he trusts him more. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I'm, of course, looking forward to seeing how we're going to wrap it up. And he's straight up breaking the bones of a 10-year-old kid. So I think we've established that he's a decent villain now. I'm willing to give him, he is at least B-tier villain. So keep it up. Batgirl number 6, written by Gail, Simone, art by Ardian, Syaf. We left off last issue with Gretel hypnotizing Bruce Wayne into attacking Batgirl, aka using that 338 thing going on. This issue picks up, still in the same fight, and Batgirl's like, okay, So Bruce Wayne, aka Batman, is hypnotized. He's attacking me. He seems like he's really into it. And I'm totally not up to face Batman if that's actually happening right now. So, ooh, this is going to be hard. So she ends up fighting him, trying to get it, like, talk him down the whole time without actually throwing a punch, because he's still Bruce Wayne. And he's like, hey, Bruce, I don't want to hurt you, Mr. Wayne. Please wake up. But in the end, she ends up having to kick him in the face, and she's like, oh, I am so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. The assistant comes up from behind and whacks Batgirl with one of the tablets that she had. And Batgirl's like, why would you do that? You saw he was attacking me. Like, I clearly was not just coming after him for no reason. And, of course, at that point, Bruce Wayne gets back up. And so Batgirl starts to reason, like, okay, hold on now. This is Batman. I'm sure that he has resisted every type of mental attack that has ever been thrown at him. He's too smart to fall for something like this. Maybe he's, like, mostly resisting it. And right now, this is all just for show, because why would Bruce Wayne be able to resist it? So let me just see if we can do this a bit easier. And at that point, Bruce Wayne is charging at Batgirl. She just suplexes him over and thinks back to when they were in the when she was in the hospital after her shooting by the Joker. She was just laying there, and Batman showed up in the hospital room, and she was expecting him to lash out and be like, oh, you were never fit to be Batgirl. You should have trained harder. How did you let this happen? But in the end, he just held her hand and just stood there without saying a word. So, he actually does care about her. And so at that point, Batgirl's like, okay, Bruce, do you know where we are? Because, 2 blocks that way, it's where your parents died. We're bringing that up. It's crime alleys over there, Bruce. They're watching you. Don't disappoint them. And at that point, Bruce Wayne drops the crowbar, and he's like, oh, God, what have I done? And so he runs over, hugs Barbara. And they whisper to each other, like, were you just faking that? And he's like, mostly, yeah, but, thanks for what you're doing. And he leans right into her ear and whispers how she was always meant to be Batgirl, which gives her this big surge of confidence. Also, throughout this fight, I didn't mention, at one point, Gretel pulls out a gun, and she's like, oh, I loaded my gun, Batgirl, so once this is done, I only have 3 bullets. Then there are 4 of you, so one of you will have to be dead. Ha 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 ha. So, yeah, that happened. But then as soon as the hypnosis wears off, she just runs away. And Bruce Wayne is like, okay, well, we're going to delay the ceremony until tomorrow. Thank you, Batgirl. Don't you have somewhere to be? And she flies off trying to trace down Gretel. And then we get Gretel's whole backstory of her being Leslie Bonner, who was going to be the next Lois Lane. She got in to an undercover reporting thing with a mob boss named Boss Whitaker, and finding out all the people who were related, judges, reporters, cops, powerful men in general. And then one day they found the voice recorder in her bag, and they just shot her 3 times with a .38 revolver. 338. Do you get it? Because if not, they're going to spell it out in 3 pages. So she was shot and she landed in the harbor, but then miraculously she survived. And she was brought to a hospital, and she had this now chip on her shoulder of how her life was taken by some powerful man, and she was brought back to life and kept alive by a bunch of other powerful men, and she just doesn't feel like she has any say in her own life. But something in how she was shot allows her to basically just mind control people. Why the 338? Never actually gets into it, but regardless, that's her story. So anyway, Barbara comes back home. Her mom's making a bunch of baked goods, trying to get on her good side, because that was a storyline that I completely forgot about. She gives her the cold shoulder. Does end up taking 2 muffins, though, which she does just one Google search, as far as I can tell, and comes right up with Leslie Bonner 338. And so she calls up Bruce, and she's like, hey, so she's still going to come after you. Also, Boss Whitaker died 30 minutes ago, so clearly that's just saying that that's definitely the same girl. But she's going to be coming after you again, so how about you act as bait this time? So they do the ceremony again the next day. Batgirl's keeping watch, and as soon as Bruce starts to give his speech for dedication for knocking down this old house, all of the cops unleash fire on Bruce. Batgirl tackles him to the ground, starts taking out the cops, And then we see Gretel is up on a crane up above saying like, oh, you men of Gotham, you diseased plague upon this town, come and follow under me so that we may be rid of you, or blah, blah, blah. And then Detective McKenna, who I guess is in this book now, punches out Batgirl, tells her that she's under arrest, and Batgirl's like, can I take care of this first? And McKenna's like, all right, but I got my eye on you. So Batman and Batgirl go up to the crane where they are, and it's not even like a fight. They just talk to her. She throws one punch, and then Batgirl tackles her off the crane. And she's like, oh, just let me fall. I've never had any control. I'll be powerless if they arrest me. And Batgirl's like, I mean, yeah, but you kind of had to know that was happening, right? So she just sets her down. McKenna arrests Gretel, and she's like, are you going to arrest me too? She's like, well, I guess I'll let you off the hook this one time, Batgirl. So that resulted in nothing. And then we get it how it's related to Batgirl because of the feelings of powerlessness and the blah, blah, blah. So I think my biggest issue with this is that the end of issue 4 was all about the mom being the thing, which ended up being like a nothing. I'm sure we're going to keep moving forward with it. But like over the course of these 2 issues, it's been a nothing, and Gretel was the big reveal. So also I get that wanting to make your villains like the dark reflection of your heroes. Like they have something in common with the hero. In Gretel's case, it was the feeling of powerlessness, the feeling of not being in control of your own destiny or your own life or whatever. And I get how that's a reflection on Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, but I also, like, it's so flimsy. Especially because the entire first issue, none of that was apparent. Like, it was only just coming to light in this issue, and it just made it feel like, oh yeah, how do we relate this to Batgirl so she can end on a moral note? Lack of control over her own life. That'll do it. Like, you could have put anything in those 2 pages that were her backstory, and it would have worked. So, yeah, no. I think it's just a little bit flimsy. I do like it. I think it's a decent enough story overall, but it just kind of feels like this issue was like nothing compared to, like, both issues together feel like one issue worth of content. I think that's the best way I could put it. So I'm giving this one a 6.5, mainly just because I think it wrapped it up decently enough, but I definitely think that this was stretched a bit too thin. Batwoman number 6, written by J.H. Williams III and W. Haden Blackman, art by Amy Reeder. Last issue was the end of an arc and the end of a trade, so this issue, brand new trade, and it's called To Drown the World. Just throwing out there, I don't think it was part of issue 6, but this trade includes the story so far, which includes the stuff that I was supposed to know before issue 1. Super useful to have. Really would have liked that in the previous trade, but regardless. This one's broken up to a bunch of different stories all happening at different times. So story number 1 is Batwoman's story, starting now. And Batwoman's fighting against the hook-handed man who actually attacked Bet all those issues ago. And she's like, oh, we're the children. And the hook-handed man's like, oh, we all belong to Mother. There is no escape. And we see that she's fighting in like this underwater lair against a dude with a sword in the background with like the Medusa snake on him. And it looks like the hook-handed man gets his hook into Kate's stomach, and she's knocked down, and he's approaching on her. And then we cut over to Jacob Kane's story, the hospital 1 month ago. He's sitting with Bet, and one of the nurses is like, hey, your papa's here. And he's like, oh, I'm not the papa, I'm the uncle. He's like, oh, well, you show up here and you sit in silence the whole time. Maybe it would do some good if you talk to her. And he's like, she's comatose. She can't hear anything. What would it help to talk to her? And he's like, you're in Gotham Central, man. These are some weird places. So Jacob sits for a second, and then he starts talking to Bet and starts reading her spy novel that he has with him. Then we cut over to Maggie's story. She's in her office 1 week ago talking to the parents of some of the kids that got kidnapped by La Llorona last arc, and basically is being chewed out by the parent for them not doing enough because they're not spending every waking moment looking for these kids. And the parent accuses her of like not having any idea what it's like to have a child and have it taken away. Slams the door on Maggie. And Maggie reaches into a drawer on her desk and pulls out a photo frame, which she stares forlornly at, but we don't get to see what that is. Then we get Morrow's story, new character. He's drowning the children from the, like, La Llorona's children from last arc, and it's very graphic of how, like, he's drowning these kids. And basically, there's a man there named Falchion, and they're just talking. They're part of their own evil thing. And apparently, Morrow gets his powers by people believing in legends. So because people believe that La Llorona exists, he can turn the mother of these children into La Llorona. He can make that a real thing. And as such, she will be a tool that they can use to take over Gotham because people will start believing in monsters again. I think this is important, so take notes. So then we go to Kate's story 3 weeks ago. She's at Maggie's apartment, and they're waking up after a night together. She's out in the kitchen having some coffee. Maggie's looking for her badge. And offhandedly, Kate mentions that her father taught her to box. And Maggie is surprised that she just brought up her father because it's been apparently like a month since anything has ever been said about the father, ever since she shut down him out of her life. And Kate immediately is like, no, we're not talking about him. We're not talking about anything in the past because right now it's just you and me and this is the only part of it I like. So Maggie agrees, but only tentatively. She's like, all right, for now. Then we get Chase's story along with Batwoman. They're trying to hunt down Medusa, and as Chase is being pinned down by gunfire, Batwoman comes in and starts knocking out thugs. And Chase chews out Batwoman for not having her radio on in order to talk to him, and Batwoman's like, because you're annoying me. I'm trying to get work done. So they all start fighting the thugs. They unleash a hail of gunfire again. This time Chase isn't undercover, so Batwoman just jumps in the way of it, and they all just tink off of her suit, and it's revealed that Batwoman has some new nanofiber armor that the DEO is just like, yeah, we've got all the crazy cool toys. You're basically never going to have to worry about anything again. So, yeah, there's that. And then that brings us back to Batwoman's story now, where, because you remember she had the nanofiber armor, as it turns out the Hook-handed man didn't actually gut her. It was all just an act to get him in close. So she grabs his hook and then says, like, all right, well, I'm going to make you cry for mommy now, freak. And that's where the issue ends. I like it, but it feels like an intermediate issue. It feels like, okay, we wound down that last arc. We're just going to take a second, see where all the characters are right now, because it was a little bit hectic there at the end, and we'll pick up on what we're doing next time. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, but it definitely doesn't feel like it should be part one of the arc. It feels like it should just be its own separate thing, and I don't know which of these we're going to carry on to. I'd assume the Now storyline of her in this underwater base, but I also feel like we don't have enough information as to how she got there, so we have to carry on at least one of the other plots as well. I'm not sure, frankly, and I'm not complaining about it, but if this is part one, it didn't do a lot to set up what we're actually doing here, and if this is an intermediate issue, it shouldn't be labeled as part one. So that's my only trade-off. I'm giving this a 6.5 though. Compared to the art in the previous arc, this is a very large step down, unfortunately, but it's still good. It's a different style. It's not as just crazy off-the-wall layouts and just beautiful painted art style. It's a lot more typical comic layouts and art, but it's still creative. It's still, like, the part where she's getting shot, each of the bullets has their own, like, mini panel. So it's creative. It's just a step down from the previous art. So yeah, 6.5. I like it. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes, but I feel like we haven't quite started the arc yet. Superboy number 6, written by Scott Lobdell, art by R.B. Silva. Last issue was Superboy number 5, but you need to have known to read Teen Titans number 4 and 5 because Those are the immediate precedings of this issue. Superboy 5 doesn't even matter. So Superboy 6 picks up at the tail end of the fight with the Teen Titans. We don't see it happen, but it's literally beat for beat what happens in that book, except we get more of Superboy's internal monologue. I'm just like, oh, I fought the Teen Titans and blah, 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 blah. And he talks to Solstice for a second, and Solstice just is like, oh, there's blood on your hands, and nowhere is bad news, and there's a culling coming and a dark harvest, and you're going to be on the bad side of things. And Superboy's like, I don't believe you. And she's like, well, all right. So then Superboy headbutts her, knocks him out, and then flies away. But I guess believes her enough that he goes to the van that is keeping an eye on him during this whole battle, kicks it into the river, and says, hey, I'm done with the lies and the truths. Let Templar know that I'm coming for him to get answers. And then we see him just flying over the city. I think it's New York. And it's just, he's so emo the whole time. Like, free will isn't a blessing. It's a curse. Why do I feel so haunted? So bad. Like, shut up, dude. Anyway, he got his outfit ripped in the middle of the fight. And then he makes a comment of like, oh, hey, my costume's fixed. I wonder if that's part of my powers or if it's the suit or what. And then we just don't ever bring that up again. So I'm mentioning it to you just so you know they're not going to bring it up again. Also, he's possibly experienced guilt for the first time, which I feel like he has before, but regardless. Anyway, he looks over and there's Supergirl. So you also need to be reading Supergirl. Kind of. I'm so confused. So Supergirl shows up and he's like, she is talking in Kryptonian, which of course he can't understand. And she's like, hey, why are you wearing my family symbol on your chest? And he's like, whoa, hi, nice to meet you. And she's like, oh, you don't even speak Kryptonian. You suck. And he's like, all right, well, I don't know what's going on, but this symbol, are you part of Nowhere too? And when he's pointing the symbol, Supergirl is like, yeah, that's why I'm here, the symbol, because I saw it and I came to investigate. And as soon as she touches him, there's like some telepathic link thing that shows Krypton being like completely destroyed. And immediately he pushes her away with his telepathic ability. But then he starts talking in Kryptonian. And he's like, why'd you do that to me? And she's like, whoa, all right. So I guess you do speak Kryptonian. What's up? And very briefly in the conversation, he's like, all right, so I know that you're a full alien, not a half alien like me. You're not a clone by Nowhere. And as soon as he says the word clone, Supergirl punches Superboy into outer space, yelling out Cornell. And he's like, I don't even know what I did this time. So he's up in space. She flies up and then does the whole hammer down back to Earth thing. And as she's trying to beat him up on the way down, she finally catches one of her fists. And then I guess that he's made the assumption or learned somewhere in there that the clones of their world rose up in revolt. And he uses his powers and it does something to Supergirl to actually knock her out for a second. But he grabs her cape and he's like, hey, I don't want to fight. I just want answers as to who I am and why you got so pissed off that I'm a clone. And Supergirl explains that there was apparently a disastrous experiment with cloning on Krypton. And all of the clones, which are called Con-Ls, that's why he's called Con-L, deal with it, are apparently end up, no matter what, as mindless killing machines. And as soon as they come to that realization, as soon as he's like, oh, really? Seriously? The police show up in a helicopter because he has just been wrecking Times Square on New Year's Eve. And Superboy knocks it out of the sky with his telekinesis, but he makes sure to make them land gently, just enough to not bother them. But when he turns around, Supergirl's gone. And he's like, how'd she move so quickly? Oh, God, she had answers. Oh, and what about those clones? Oh, that's going to bother me all night. So then we get the Supergirl side of things, and for some reason she's just in her head of like, oh, who was that man? He's so innocent, so lost. Or maybe he was scheming and trying to get my cells to clone me. Whatever. So then we see Superboy flying back to the Nowhere base, and he's pissed off that everyone's lied to him since before his birth. So he arrives and he cracks open the door and he just yells out, Templar, I want to fight. But as soon as he cracks it open inside, it's not Templar, but Rose Wilson, who's like, oh, Templar's gone. You're going to have to fight me, and I'm looking forward to killing you for a long time. And that's where we leave off. Because I have been reading Teen Titans against my will, I get it. I understand how this flows. But nowhere in here, like, this isn't the sort of thing that you're just like, oh, hey, at some point I fought the Teen Titans, and you just deal with that. We open up with him battle-scarred with their bodies lying all around him. That's not something that you can just say, oh, by the way, you should have picked up those previous issues. I hope you were. Like, what? No, you tell us that. That's a crossover. You've made this a crossover now, and you need to tell us this so we know what issues to buy. I'm pissed off for people 10 years ago reading this. As for the Supergirl thing, like, where I am in Supergirl, it doesn't even make any sense that she's here at any point. Like, there's no point where this fits in. So it must be that somehow this happened 2 months ago to the Teen Titans, but is going to happen in, like, a couple months for Supergirl. Whatever. Point being, it's not an awful issue. It's not like doing terrible things. There are certain points where I wish Connor would just shut up, but at the same point, has he ever? So I can't be that upset at it. It just feels like such a nothing issue. It just feels like, oh, well, every other book we've managed to cross over with Batman, but we can't really justify Superboy meeting Batman. So instead we'll use Supergirl. There we go. That's the crossover to get those books going. Despite the fact you had a crossover with Teen Titans, but regardless, it doesn't matter. Okay, so anyway, I'm giving this just a straight 5. It doesn't do anything particularly good, but it also doesn't do anything particularly wrong for me reading it 10 years later with reading everything. I am docking like half a point for the fact that for previous readers, people who had to pick this up issue to issue, this was stupidly done. You don't open a scene at the end of a battle that is very critical to understanding future developments of this character. Okay, no. 5 for this. God, I hope we get somewhere fast. Green Lantern number 6, written by Geoff Johns, art by Michael Choi. We left off last issue with Sinestro dumping Hal back on Earth with a Green Lantern ring without a charge, and he went and made up with Carol, and they're giving it another shot. And the Guardians are doing something about waking up the First Lantern and leading the Third Army and replacing the Green Lantern Corps because they're all evil and stuff like that. This issue picks up with basically filler. You can call it character development. I'm calling it filler. It's the Coast City Aeronautical Museum, and they're going on a date, Carol and Hal, despite the fact they spend all their time around airplanes anyway. Carol heads off to the bathroom, and Hal looks down at his hand, sees there's no ring there. We see that he left it just on the countertop at home. And as he's walking around, he stumbles across some guys who were like stealing some aeronautics parts from some old timer who's fixing up a plane. And they're like threatening his life because he ratted them out and they wanted more, I guess. I don't know. It's not made super clear. But anyway, Hal steps in and he's just like, hey, I'm going to kick your guys' ass if you try to kick his ass. And he's like, yeah, it's 4 against 1. And he's like, good. And it's a short fight scene there. He takes them all out, gets his tie ripped off. And he's like, oh, sorry for the dents on your plane, old man. And he's like, nah, it's good. Better than dents in my head. And we see that he takes the tie off one of the guys that he just knocks out. Because, got to be formal date wear. So, as soon as he gets back with Carol, he's like, oh, can we get out of here? I think I've had enough excitement for today. And she's like, how are you going to not be bored here on Earth, not being Green Lantern? Like, you've literally traveled across the universe. How could you ever be happy here? And he's like, Carol, I think I just might be. I'm not Green Lantern anymore. So, he seems okay with that. Then we go to the planet Ogoro. There's a man pushing a cart who, as soon as he enters into his room, he is blinded by a green light of Sinestro. And apparently the guy's name is Starstorm. And it's speaking of the whole backstory. Apparently at some point Starstorm was a guy who was giving Sinestro a lot of grief when he was a Yellow Lantern. And then Sinestro, like, really kicked his ass to the point of humiliating the guy, and now he feels he has, like, nothing to live for. But Sinestro needs him to use his abilities by putting on this special helmet in order to find Lyssa, who is a Yellow Lantern that Sinestro needs to find for some reason. It's not even super clear why. He just wants to find her, and he knows that she's on this planet. And basically, he's trying to put the helmet on Starstorm. He's like, no, I'm not going to do it. You said you'd kill me if I put it on. He's like, I'm going to kill you if you don't. Put on the helmet. And he keeps trying to, like, threaten Starstorm into being Starstorm, but, like, Sinestro broke this dude. Like, he is mentally not here right now. But in the end, he goes ahead and he puts it on, even though he doesn't want to. And he leads Sinestro to where the energy signature of Lyssa is. And as soon as they approach, Lyssa pulls out some chains of yellow energy and drags them both in. And we see that she's this purple-skinned lady with a book, and she is the keeper of the Book of the Black, which I guess she feeds off of people's misery and woe and their stories thereof. So she starts sucking the story out of Starstorm, and he's like, you were defeated humiliatingly. Oh, that's good. I like that story. That's great. And Sinestro's pissed off that she apparently betrayed him to Krona for the sacred book. Again, no idea what. But he rips out a page, and then he gets glimpses of the future. And I think I think the future. Some of it's definitely the future because he's dead in the last panel. But he sees the Guardians making their plans, and then he sees him in the Indigo tribe, and he sees Hal along with some dude dressed in black, and then he sees a White Lantern ring. And he's like, wow, okay, so the Guardians are planning some evil stuff. So Lyssa starts teasing Starstorm that, like, hey, I know how you're going to die, and it's not going to be from disease or accident. You're going to kill yourself in, like, a week. So have fun with that. And Sinestro tells him, like, hey, Starstorm, don't listen to her. Overcome your fear. Fight against her. You always gave me grief. I know you can do it. And Starstorm's like, oh, dear God, please don't hurt me. And he's like, son of a bitch, you suck, Starstorm. So he takes off the helmet, throws it at Lyssa, and that apparently is enough to cause her to blast out through a wall. And Sinestro looks at Lyssa and is just like, I would kill you, but I might need you based off of what I just saw in that book. And Starstorm, I know your life kind of sucks, but I've seen people get through worse, and you are nowhere near as strong as they are, so never mind, bye. And he's like, all right, God damn it, I need Hal Jordan. So he starts moving towards Earth again. We see Hal and Carol having some pillow talk. The ring suddenly lights up, flies around the room, goes onto his finger, and he can't get it back off, despite him trying. Sinestro shows up at the window, and he's like, hey, come on, we gotta go. And he's like, no, Sinestro, I'm not your sidekick. I'm not even Green Lantern anymore. He's like, bitch, you ain't. Come on. And that's where we leave off. It's the lead into the next arc. That's all it is. We had to have some reason that people would know what the Guardians are doing. That's it. They said what they said in the secret room, so there was no way to know what they were doing. We needed some way for the characters to get motivated on this story that they had no reason to be motivated on before. I'm not seeing, like, I hope that we continue on this idea that Hal genuinely doesn't want to be Green Lantern anymore. Like, he wants to try for that normal life. I think that that's a good character beat to move forward to after the last plot where he had to come to terms with, like, he lost the ring. I think that's a good place to move forward. I hope we don't just immediately undo that again, but we'll see what happens. Overall, for this issue, though, it is well written. The art is a step, not down, but, like, diagonally slanted in a downwards direction. It's very different than Doug Mahnke's art for the rest of the book, but it's not terrible. I especially like those Sinestro pages. The Hal pages and any other pages with a human on them are a little bit more iffy, but Aliens, he does well. So overall, I'm going to give this a 7. It's just the start of the new arc coming up next. I wouldn't even consider that part of that arc. This just feels like an intermediate issue, which is fine to have, but it's just, okay, let's get on with the rest of the story. Mr. Terrific number 6, written by Eric Wallace, art by Oliver Nome. We left off last issue with him getting off of an alien ship and coming to some sort of conclusion about something, but regardless, he made a decision as to who's going to succeed him in his company as CEO. And then there was something about a friggin' the Circle Revolution with one of the board members turning against Michael. It's all dumb. So this issue is basically a one-shot. He's fighting against some guy in a icy tundra area. He calls himself the Tomorrow Thief. He's a French dude who's just really pissed off that Mr. Terrific is American. Like, he's just going off on, like, you put a McDonald's at the Arc de Triomphe and a Starbucks next to the Louvre. It's like, okay, sure, whatever. So while he's going off on that, Michael tries throwing an icicle through his head just to take him out, and it phases right through, and he's like, very nice. And he walks through a wall into an ice cave, and he's like, come after me if you, how you say, have the stones. Anyway, Michael's like, man, today keeps getting worse and worse. I hate Valentine's Day. So this whole thing is now Valentine's Day, but we go to 24 hours before. He's having the board of directors meeting that we talked about last issue, and he's waiting on delivery before he makes his announcement as to who's going to succeed him. And a kid walks in named Jamal Mason carrying the delivery, and he's like, well, that's my successor, Jamal Mason, IQ of 192. He's going to do a great job. Could you show him how to run the ropes? Because I got a thing I got to do. So the dude named Donald is like super pissed off that this was the choice he made of just some random kid. But everyone's like, all right, well, if he says so, he's pretty smart. Somebody cut to Iceland. Michael Holt is meeting up with an old flame named Lilija Eriksdotter, which is just Lily for short. And apparently she designed like an eco-friendly high-speed railway that can blah, 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 help everybody. So they hop on and they're flirting a little bit. And then we cut to 6 hours before the fight. And Donald is talking to Alika and basically just trying to convince her of being like, hey, if we have your backing, we can overrule his stupid putting this kid in charge thing. He's not running this business. He's running this like an experiment. He just wants to see what's going to happen. And Alika's like, and I'm supposed to have his back, so no, I'm not going to come with you. And then Donald starts like putting on the moves, which she correctly just says is sexual harassment. And he's like, but baby, in a few hours it's going to be Valentine's Day. And she's like, all right, I'm going to go. You're a creep. And as she's walking away, he's like, you should have let me in. Otherwise, I could have saved you come the Circle Revolution. So whatever. We go back to the plane. It was just 1 hour, or the train just 1 hour ago. And they're talking about how it was some big new concept called the kinetic rail capacitor that allows this to run so quickly and so cleanly and so smoothly. And Lily's the one who designed it, but Michael bankrolled it. And then they hear a scream down from the passenger car as they're flirting and talking about why their relationship didn't take off before. And we see the Tomorrow Thief just walking along the edge of the train, like totally sideways. And he steps into the train and he's like, I am here for a piece of equipment. Let me in. And Michael's like, all right, well, I'm the CEO of the thing that ran this train, so I'm the boss. And he's like, you're the boss? And he's like, I'm the boss. And then he phases Michael through the train wall. He's like, now I'm the boss. So everyone thinks Michael's dead. In reality, because he's Mr. Terrific, he lands in a snowbank and he's barely hurt. He uses his T-sphere to turn into a costume. And as the Tomorrow Thief takes the kinetic rail capacitor, it took me a second, he flies off on a jetpack and he's like, all right, now to get my payment from Dalton. Mr. Terrific stops him. They have a brief little fight. And as they're fighting, and apparently Tomorrow Thief is able to use his powers to send like an atomic shock through Mr. Terrific, because his whole thing is that he can control his molecular bonds, and that's how he's able to phase through things. So that disrupts Mr. Terrific's ability to use his T-spheres because they're all linked like neurally to him and blah blah atomic blah whatever. But anyway, he realizes like, hey, I got your briefcase full of the kinetic rail capacitor. So if this is the thing you want, I'm just going to blow it up. And he blows it up. And he's like, you idiot. Do you have any idea what you've done? And he's like, I got rid of the thing that we're fighting over. So then they fight some more. And that's pretty much where we open the issue. So then we go to the inside of an underground lake, a volcanic lake inside of this glacier. And because Mr. Terrific's had time to figure this out, he sees the Tomorrow Thief phasing through the wall behind him, grabbing his head, and Mr. Terrific flips him up and lands him in the volcanic lake, which I guess because it has so much heat, it disrupts his atomic bonds, and he's not able to use his powers, so he's just like stuck there burning alive, which is a thing. And then at this point, Mr. Terrific realizes, like, cool, I'm stranded out in the tundra in the middle of Iceland, and nobody knows where I am. I'm going to have to walk into this lake, essentially flash freeze myself, and then just wait it out until somebody finds me. And it works. Like, somebody does find him, and Lily's like, that was the dumbest thing I think you ever possibly could have done. He's like, right, but was it actually super smart? And he's like, that's exactly why we didn't work out together. And they go, ha ha ha, happy Valentine's Day, Lily. And that's where we leave off. Totally one and done, one shot, unless somehow Tomorrow Thief comes back, which frankly I don't see Volcanic Lake being a thing you really come back from. It's okay. Like, I'm not... The only thing that matters in this issue is the reveal of who the successor is, and frankly, I don't care about that plot, like, at all. I don't think I really have cared about a plot over this entire book. Like, whether it's him controlling his anger in the first arc, this business subterfuge subplot. The alien ship was the closest I got to caring, but it was done in 2 issues, so I don't care about the French dude either. So yeah, I'm just kind of done with this. It's fine. It's not doing anything horrible. It just can't make me care about it. I don't have any sort of like, wow, yes, you're giving me insight into this character. He's just a trivia machine. That's all he's doing. He's just like, but the hydrogen and the ionic bonds. No, shut up. I'm done. So are you. You got canceled. He's got 2 issues left, and we know that. So, no, I'm going to give this a 6. Because, again, it's not doing anything wrong. And the art's actually pretty okay. Oliver Nome did a fine job on art. It's just a matter of I don't care about the writing. And I don't think there's anything you can really do in these last 2 issues to make me care at this point. Deathstroke number 6, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Joe Bennett and Eduardo Pansica. Left off last issue with Deathstroke fighting against a meta-powered legacy and having a literal nuclear sub dropped on his face. So yeah, this issue picks up with a flashback to Ravager, his son, fighting through a horde of men, just shooting all of them, and making his way towards this big mansion building. There's a guy who's looking terrified inside. And as Ravager goes up the stairs, enters into his bedroom, he's like, all right, you're going to die. And he stabs the guy in the head with a knife. And Deathstroke is immediately behind saying, like, dude, that sucked. And they just get into this little argument over how he's, like, not killing them quickly or efficiently enough. Like, it took 2.5 minutes for him to get there, and every one of their impact wounds are 4 inches apart. So Deathstroke is just basically telling him, like, you've messed up everything, and the biggest thing you were about to mess up is you can't take credit for something that no one knows you did. So he makes sure to stab Ravager's knife into the nightstand, and he's like, you're my son, get better, god damn it. Something cuts to shortly afterwards, and Grant is sitting talking to his mother in the study, and basically the mother's just like, yeah, no, your father's right, you kind of suck, you need to step up your game, we are Wilsons and we are warriors, how dare you. And so Grant's like, all right, I guess I can go talk to Dad. So he walks over to Deathstroke, who is decidedly pre-eye patch at this point, and he's reading a book, and he's like, hey, so what are you reading? And he's like, oh, well, this book is only for winners, I'm not sure you would care since you're so set on being a loser. And he's like, try me, bitch. So Deathstroke tells him it's the story of Achilles and how blah, blah, blah. It's the Iliad and how he had, the Achilles heel. That was his weakness. And Deathstroke, S.H.A.D.E tells Grant, it's like, look, the moral of the story is be aware of your weakness and how they can be perceived, so that way you can hide them from your enemies before they become liabilities. And then we see slightly later, Grant is being beaten to hell by some shadowy figure who is basically doing it to get back at Deathstroke, it sounds like. He's like your dad always says, it's about the statements. And we see this bomb being left next to Grant, who's being bound and just ruined. And then we see Deathstroke running down the streets trying to get to it, but then before he can, this whole city block just like explodes, and Deathstroke just looks sad. And now we get to now, where S.H.A.D.E somehow survived face down in a puddle, and Legacy's just like, when I heard you were back, I thought maybe it was some kind of publicity stunt, or maybe you got some sort of new like toy that made you stronger, but nah, you're just still a guy. And he's just throwing Deathstroke around, barely able to like do anything against Legacy, and he plunges, I think, Deathstroke's own sword into his shoulder, and he's like, all right, so what do you got to say? And S.H.A.D.E's like, where is my son? And Legacy tells him, like, no, what? This has nothing to do with your son. I don't know what you're talking about. No, this is about that girl from issue 1, the part of the Harm Armory. Yeah, her parents are real pissed at you. So this is what you get. So immediately Deathstroke pulls out the sword from his shoulder, starts trying to use it against Legacy. Not getting very far, but then we see he manages to plant a bomb on Legacy's outfit and starts running for it, trying to get away. He runs into the sub, and then Legacy makes sure to tell us that the suit is built from nth metal, so there's nothing that's going to dent it. So we see S.H.A.D.E pulling apart some wires and doing some stuff, trying to get something built up. And when Legacy finally arrives, he has the wire wrapped around his sword, and he's got his finger on the trigger. And Legacy's like, oh, what are you going to do? You're going to press that button and, like, detonate this entire sub? Again, nth metal, baby. It ain't going to do nothing. And he's like, nope, it has nothing to do with the blast. It's all about the energy. And he's like, oh, okay, what's the energy going to do? It's like, same thing every EMP is going to do. And he sets off the blast of an EMP, which totally knocks out the electronics in the guy's suit, not having to mess with the metal at all. And then we see a S.H.A.D.E walking up with a broken shard of a pole, ready to shove it into the face, like the gaps in his outfit. And he particularly asks where his son is. And then we see it was through a video feed. The parents of the girl are watching, and they're like, you didn't tell us that you had a personal connection to Deathstroke. And he's like, of course I did. What did you expect? And we see Grant step out of the shadows saying, isn't a son supposed to best his father? And that's the big reveal, is that the person who's really, 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 really behind all of this is Grant. Maybe. I don't know. I like it. It's definitely a solidly told thing. It's mostly just the action scene in the middle there, but I like the opening of setting out, like, okay, what kind of parent was S.H.A.D.E to Grant? What kind of thing was he afterwards in, like, his memorial of him, trying to figure out what's going on? And it was a good way to show that he was so ridiculously hard on him, it makes sense that he's now the person who's pulling the strings behind this. He's the one who's getting the upper hand on Deathstroke. I think that's a good turn. I think that set that up pretty well. Art-wise, it's all fantastic throughout. Can't really complain about anything. The only thing I might be able to begrudge, and I think I mentioned this before, is that the Legacy outfit looks exactly like the outfit that we got going on by the villain in Batman and Robin right now. It's just more technicolored. And it just kind of throws me off because they're both on the same week. But regardless, very good. I would give it a 7. My only critiques particularly are that it just still... While this feels like it's going to be the last big reveal, it is still just doing reveals. Like it's doing those big shocker dun 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 final pages. I would like a little bit more substance, but I'm not sure if that's really something that I should be expecting from a book where there was an entire issue devoted to just, I think it was a truck guy, like an entire highway just Mad Max scene, which I praised. I enjoyed that, but I do want just a little bit more. If we're going to get into this family drama, give me a little bit more substance to it. Grifter number 6, written by Nathan Edmonson, art by Scott Clark. We left off last issue with Grifter being captured and brought to the mothership for some sacrificial hoo-ha. And this issue picks up with Sophia running to, I think, take an airplane or maybe hijack an airplane, hard to tell, in order to basically fly up and try to find the UFO that they have been abducted up to. And a lot of this I'm just going to skim over because it's just your general third act, like, oh, here's the biggest moment of our, like, our heroes have to come through now or else they'll be doomed sort of stuff. So basically this whole time she's trying to open up the portal to the Black Curate, I think it's called, which is just a big bad monster thing. And Grifter sees that his girlfriend Gretchen's there, and they're all just pissed off at each other now, except he's worried about Gretchen. We see that Sophia literally jumps out of the plane because she had a tracker put on Grifter and was like, okay, well, according to this, you should be under me. So she jumps off and then lands on the UFO, completely invisible. And just skipping ahead here, she ends up breaking in and starts throwing around like grenades to try to interrupt the machine moving parts or whatever. But yeah, no, this is literally like 5 straight pages of just, oh, the Black Curate is here. Is the Grifter bound and ready? And like he breaks out of the restraints and he's like, oh, restrain him. And then like that just happens like 3 more times where he just keeps on like fighting people this whole time. There is one point where multiple times throughout there's this green text box that's like screaming out through the telepathy, like really loud, saying help me. We'll get back to that. He runs over to Gretchen and gives her his mask that has a knife hidden in it so that she's able to break out of her cell, which I don't feel like alien cells should be able to be broken out of with a knife, but regardless, this Black Curate thing starts making its way out of this portal as the grenades from What's-Her-Face go off. Grifter's got one of the telepathic guns, and it's like, psh, that only works if you're telepathic like us. And he's like, bitch, guess what? And he starts firing off the gun. It's just one whole big fight scene. But as the lady finally gets involved and stops trying to just, like, pomp and circumstance in front of the portal, the Black Curate, I guess, reaches through and basically just says, like, hey, what are you doing, lady? You were supposed to have this settled before you called us. You are a disgrace. And just, like, devours her. And then the Black Curate directs all the Damonites who are around, like, all right, go ahead and kill these 3 because they're all a pain in my ass. And at that point, I say these 3 because Sophia jumps in and she's throwing around grenades, and basically everyone's just saying, like, all right, we got to run, hurry up. And one of the grenades damages the portal, and the Black Curate's just doing that thing at the end of the Tenacious D movie with the devil being sucked down to the portal. Just, no, I'll get you, Grifter. So Gretchen is being led out by Grifter by the hands, but then one of the Damonites grabs hold of her and drags her back into the closing portal. Grifter tries to dive after her, but Sophia convinces him, like, all right, we gotta go. And they jump out through a vent, land down on the ground safely. And Grifter just doubles down on his vows, like, you've taken my brother. Now you've taken the love of my life. I will have my revenge. But then that green circle goes off again, just screaming help in his head. And apparently in the Himalayas, something has happened. And the green voice is saying, come to me, help me, find me. And that's where we leave off. The Himalayas. Sure. Like, in terms of it being the big final thing, it feels like for this particular story arc, I'm fine with it. Like, it's this whole, okay, oh, huge bombastic, this thing's coming through, how evil is it? But it feels like the end of, like once you've decided you're going to do, like, a trilogy of books, this feels like the end of the first book, where it can't be the biggest thing you're ever going to do, but it has to introduce the villain of, like, the next 2 books. I feel like that's all we were doing here. Where it was like, yeah. Like, this is a big deal that he's having this final battle thing, but we're really just setting up for the next book. And as such, it kind of takes away from the, like, power of the moment, you know? Where it's like, oh, they sealed the portal, but at what cost? Like, this was never going to be the end. You guys, I get that's a thing with comic books, but you should still write good arcs, you know? You should still write satisfying stories instead of just the long form there. The character can be long form, but the individual stories should be satisfying within their own right. And it just feels like this was setting up for, like, it's the end of Amazing Spider-Man 2, where they have the entire Secret Six or whatever, Sinister Six, just laid out there, like, just assuming they'd get it. It's just like, all right, I guess, whatever. Overall, though, I'm going to give this one a 6. I think the art feels a little bit weird, but I'm pretty sure this is like, no, okay, this is a different artist than usual. But it blends in well, but something's off about it. I couldn't tell you specifically what. But yeah, no, it just feels like it cheapened its own ending for the sake of having a big bombastic ending. Where it was just like, yeah, well, we can't actually have him defeat all the Damonites right now, but we also need him to have some sort of victory, so he closed the portal. The end. It's like, all right, that's not an ending, though. Give me an ending to a story arc. But, hey, that's me. That's just what I think. So 6 for this. We'll see what the next part of this trilogy or quadrilogy or however long they're going is going to start with. Suicide Squad number 6, written by Adam Glass, art by Clayton Henry. We left off last issue with the squad being called out because Harley Quinn had escaped and they got to go catch her. And she escaped because she heard the Joker may or may not be dead. So we're in Gotham and the squad now consists of Deadshot and King Shark as usual, but we also have Savant and Lime and Light, which made brief appearances at the beginning of Green Arrow's run. So thank you, book, for reminding me of that. But anyway, they're chasing a Harley through Gotham. They're, introducing everybody who we're unfamiliar with. And we see Deadshot lining up a shot to slow her down. But Savant takes the shot first and it goes through her arm. And Deadshot's like, hey, dumbass, how about you shoot her through the legs next time so she can't run away from us so quickly? And he's like, I meant to shoot her in the arm because I like to play with my food before I eat it. And he's like, you're an idiot. So the other ones take off after Harley. She's making her way like out of the alleys and into the open streets. So they call up Waller and she's just like, hey, look, yeah, keep it as quiet as you can, but do whatever you have to. Anyway, I got to go. The events of Stormwatch number 5 are happening, which was a strange thing to throw in there, but regardless, they did. So they go into this house, warehouse, hard to tell what it is, but King Shark busts through the door, and when they arrive, they see Harley laying dead on the ground, quote unquote, but as they flip her over, sees that it's actually just some guy who's dressed up as Harley, and in through a door nearby is a group of what I can only describe are like freaks, all dressed up as Harley, all coming out with weapons to beat up the Suicide Squad, and they're like, well, we're gonna have to kill everything. So they start killing everything. And Deadshot and Savant are talking, and they come to the conclusion that these people are only here to slow down their attempt to get to Harley, and they have no idea where Harley actually is right now. And then we get the whole backstory to Harley of her she's currently at Arkham. She is monologuing to herself basically the history of her and the Joker. And we see, you probably know this, but it's her going in to question the Joker. She's just not afraid of him. She stays on her own level with him. And it's basically she calls him out on all the like basic psychological stuff that he probably has. And when he pulls out like a knife and stealthily has it in his hand, she calls him out for that too. And she's like, well, if you're going to use that knife, you better not miss. Otherwise, I'm going to kick you in the nuts. And Joker gets a kick out of that. So then we see that she's actually not monologuing. She's talking to one of her fellow psychiatrists there at Arkham back when she worked there, named Dr. Serrano. And she basically asks, like, hey, is it true? Is the Joker dead? And she's like, I don't know. The rumor is that he's been skinned alive and they have his face at the Gotham City Police Department. And Harley doesn't take that well and ends up slitting her throat. So we cut back to the Suicide Squad. The fight's pretty much over, but for some reason, Deadshot and Savant are still like fighting each other because I guess they're just stepping on each other's toes. There's one weird bit where King Shark goes to eat like a dwarf, but when he opens his mouth, we see that Yo-Yo from the previous issue is still alive in there, which is all sorts of messed up. So anyway, they find the Siamese twin, two Siamese twins that are still alive, and they start interrogating, like, all right, which one is a smart half? And then we see Harley go to their old, like, Joker's funhouse, like one of their hangout spots, their hideout spots. And we see more about how basically one time Joker was breaking down Harley just as much as Harley was breaking down him. And he made the point of her father was killed in a hit and run, and the person who hit her was like, or hit the father was some super rich guy, so he got off no problem. But he had like a distinctive pinky ring on his finger. And then we see him hand over a folded up napkin to Harley, and inside this napkin is the pinky ring and like the full finger along with it. And he's like, I would have brought the whole body for you, but that was, he was a fat guy. That's not so easy to do. So she's at that point just like simultaneously very upset by this, but also kind of like happy that the Joker did this for her, which then leads straight into like, oh, I'm gonna get my pudding back no matter what. So then we see that one of the Siamese twins was shot by Deadshot, and the other one has given up all the information on the Joker being skinned. And Deadshot's like, hey, Waller, is this true? And she's like, yeah, no, they've got the face over GCPD. And he's like, you think you could have told us this beforehand? Clearly that's where she was going to end up. So they try to run their way over to the police department, but by the time they get there, Harley's already turning herself into the police. So that way, instead of having to break into the police station, she's just going to be led right in there, and she can basically kill all of them while she's in there. So they have to break into the Gotham City Police Department in order to get Harley before she kills all of them. And that's where the issue leads off. So I like it. It's a good setup for like a little Harley story, just a short little thing of like, okay, she's going out, she's fine. Like, we're dealing with her past with the Joker. This is, I think, the first time she's been on the Suicide Squad, so it's good to explore like these different things. She hasn't been a huge part of continuity up until now. This was before the real like Harley boom, so I'm definitely in on this. It's a good examination. I think nowadays it doesn't hold up as well because we've seen that same story of Harley in the room with Joker like a billion times. It's like seeing Crime Alley with Batman at this point. But it was done well here, and I think it would have been done well back in 2012. So overall, I'm going to give this a 6.5. My primary issue is the fact that the non-Harley plot, like the rest of the squad, just kind of feels like their entire thing of the Joker goons or whatever was all completely inconsequential. Like, they dealt with that. They got the info that Waller had the whole time, so Waller could have easily just told them, and then we ended up where they needed to be at the first place. So that kind of felt inconsequential. But the Harley thing, I think, is good building up of the character for someone who doesn't know who or what she is in this continuity yet. So 6.5 for this. Checking out to see how it wraps up, because we only got one issue left in this trade. I'm definitely looking forward to it. Legion Lost number 6, written by Fabian Nicieza and Tom DeFalco, art by Pete Woods. We left off last issue with Gates, supposedly the dead member, coming through a portal and rejoining the group, and Timberwolf, along with Chameleon Girl, who is in a different alien body, were stopped by Martian Manhunter. This issue picks up. Martian Manhunter was telling Timberwolf, like, so I picked up a signal in my own book, I guess, and I traced it and it led me back to you, but you somehow recognize me, which I'm like a ghost, so how's that happening? And Timberwolf's like, wouldn't you like to know, Martian Manhunter? And he's like, all right, I'm not a fan of this at all. Also, he knocked out Timberwolf for the military to find, and so Chameleon Girl and him are both now custody of, I think, the Black Razor group from like 2 issues ago. Regardless, there's this whole just basically prison breakout scene throughout the entire issue. Gates is teleporting in because he has a real dislike of any sort of form of authority. He punches a dude in the face and calls him a fascist taxidermist. So that's a thing. Everyone else is just bailing in, getting ready to fight. Timberwolf is talking to somebody in charge, Major Nicholson, and just like, so we've been tracking your people. You've been around for a while, bumping around, just causing a whole bunch of trouble, and we think we got a good feel on all of you. And she just lists off all the different Legion members, and basically just Timberwolf's just like, yeah, okay, so I can leave pretty much whenever I want, regardless of these stupid little restraints, but I'm not going to leave until I have my friend with me. Where is she? And she's like, oh, well, we've got her sedated. She's not killed, if that's what you're asking, but you're not going to get to her. And he's like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So we just see more of the prison break, and the group's just splitting up in order to find both where Chameleon Girl and Timberwolf are being held. Tellus is actually back at the motel, keeping an eye on Alistair because he's still out cold. And they checked in with him, and apparently, it gets to the end of the issue, it happens at the very end, but apparently the strain of him trying to mentally probe Alistair while talking to them at such a distance basically knocks him out. They don't show that here, but that happened. So we just see them, again, going in, breaking out. Tyrock and, I always forget the name of this guy, Wildfire, break out Chameleon Girl, and they're like, what, are we going to be able to get her back to normal? And it's like, oh, let's worry about getting her out first. But as they're taking her away, Martian Manhunter comes in and he's like, stop, you're making a mistake. And he's like, okay. And he does this big shapeshifter thing, so they start fighting him. And of course, everyone's being cryptic and not sharing like who they are or what they're doing and whatever. And then finally, Tyrock realized, like, wait a minute. Oh, shoot, I recognize this guy. Hey, stop trying to kill each other. Hey, yeah, no, look, we're from the 31st century. I know you're Martian Manhunter. Go ahead and read my mind. And he just opens up his mind and he's like, oh, okay, yeah, no, you guys are good guys. All right, cool. So your girly friend here needs some more biomass if she's going to turn back into Chameleon Girl. I think they have some in the basement. How about we go ahead? And Wildfire's like, excuse me? Weren't we just fighting like 6 seconds ago? But anyway, the government people see all this on the screens, and they're getting pissed off because Timberwolf keeps like taunting them. And she tells him to shut up, and he's like, all right, breaks out of the gauntlets that he was held in. Because again, he knows where she is now and that she's safe, so no problem. They call in basically this giant like alien like robo-walker thing, and immediately Dawnstar comes in and just smashes it to pieces. And I think she's the one who's like the overarching narrator on this one. And she just makes the point of like, we were supposed to be like superheroes, but I think like we're a diplomat sort of mission. Like we're not usually the soldiers, but I think that we're going to have to become guerrilla warriors. So that kind of sucks. But whatever, they get to fighting. Timberwolf meets up with Gates and it's like, how are you back? And he's like, I'll tell you next issue. And then we see Martian Manhunter pull out the bit of the biomass that's kept in the basement so that Chameleon Girl can regenerate. And apparently he needed something from her, and that's the whole reason that he's helping. So he helps her regenerate. She gets out of that evil-looking alien form, and she's just her normal self. And then he pulls some sort of signal. He says, the energy signature from 6 days ago was incomplete. My associates needed more, so I followed the faint trail to you. And then he just lets them go. And he straight up says that time travel is strictly one way. You guys are stuck here forever. His literal words are, you're all going to die here. And then he disappears. So when we go back to the motel, we see that Alistair has escaped because Tellus passed out. And they're like, oh, it's fine. We caught him once. We'll catch him again. It's not like that was the plot of the last 5 issues or anything. But now they're not only worrying about that, though, as Gates so elegantly puts it, how the splots do we get home? So yeah, I like this issue. I think in terms of like having a pointless cameo of some character from a different book for the sake of synergy, I think this is one of the better ways to handle it. Where for some reason, it's still a little bit nebulous, but for some reason the character needed to be there. And once it became a point of like, wait a minute, we're on the same side, the fighting just dead stopped. It wasn't a thing of like, oh, we fight until one of us is knocked out and then we finally get to talking. It's like, no, as soon as Tyrock recognized Martian Manhunter, he's like, oh, wait, hold on. No, we're cool. And he's like, oh, yeah, you guys are cool. Great. I think that's a great way to handle it. And he legitimately helped them. He legitimately was just like, all right, here's your friend back. Glad I could be of service. You're all going to die here. Goodbye. So, yeah, no. I enjoyed this issue for what it was. It still wasn't like super strong though, because it was just one extended Prison Break issue where they could get out at any point they wanted to begin with. Like none of this really felt like it was necessary from a plot standpoint, but I like it from the story it's telling sort of standpoint. So I'm going to give it a 6.5. It just kind of felt like a filler thing in order to make them realize they're not going to be able to get home, because I feel like that's not going to be the only way they're going to be able to do that otherwise is if they take some time and try to actually deal with the ship, which I guess they could have done, but to have an external character say you're never getting home at least leaves the option of, okay, well, maybe we could discover our own way. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I'm going to give it a 6.5. And we only got one issue left in the trade, so I'm looking to see how we wrap all this up. Demon Knights, number 6, written by Paul Cornell, art by Diogenes Neves. We left off last issue with Vandal Savage turncoating and going to the side of the Horde, and a giant Triceratops breaking through the woods outside of the village. This issue picks up pretty much exactly the same place. The Triceratops is charging its way forward into the village, and everyone's just kind of silently freaking out of, oh, we're all going to die. Oh, geez, that sucks. Okay, well... let's go down fighting, I guess. And we see Shining Knight and Exoristos over top the gate, and they look over and they see a bunch of the villagers waving flags of surrender. It's the people who want to just not fight, go into slavery, no big deal. And immediately they are met with a hail of arrows, killing them instantly. And it's like, all right, so they just killed a bunch of surrendering people. That's great. So at least the villagers understand there's no escape now. They have to fight or they will die. And Exoristos is like, you know what? I tipped the scales the wrong way by letting that girl get killed. I'm going to balance them. And she jumps over the fence and gets ready to fight. We see the Triceratops and 2 of its riders. Like, all right, here we go. Gonna hit the gates. Oh, hey, that giant lady is in our way. We'll just run her over. No big deal. And then we get a shot of Exoristos bringing her hammer down and just full on stopping the Triceratops like the truck in Dark Knight where it just like straight up and overs 180. Same thing. She shouts, "You will fall," and then she calls out Vandal Savage to a one-on-one fight, and Vandal's like, no, in fact, bring me dragons. So at this point, Xanadu and Horsewoman both have an idea as to how they can help, how they can do something, but it's going to require a sacrifice. And it's spread over the course of the whole issue, but Xanadu's real quick is she comes to a dying man who's like, even if this day ends in victory, he's got like 1 day left. He's not going to last. And she's like, look, if I commit a human sacrifice, I can get all of my youth and everything back. It's dark magic, but it can work. And she struggles with it, and she's like, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. She's got the knife to his throat, and she's like, son of a bitch, I can't do this. And she tosses away, cursing herself. Meanwhile, Horsewoman's whole thing is that she is communicating with the horses like telepathically in the field, and she is saying, all right, all of you, come with me if you can. Here we go. And she's got a plan. They don't say what it is yet. So then we see Al-Jabir has made a whole bunch of like auto-firing cannon, like arrow weapons, I guess is the best way to say it. Just multi-fire arrows. And they let loose, and it kills a whole bunch of these Velociraptor soldiers that are charging the gates. Shining Knight's there trying to get the soldiers ready for when they finally breach the gates, and Vanguard comes up and tells them that Horsewoman is trying to get to Alba Sarum, aka the main city that they've been trying to get to, the Horde, in order to get an army down here and help. So they just have to hold out long enough for her to get through and get to the army. So that's the plan there. Meanwhile, we see Exoristos fighting, but she's like very badly wounded, and Al-Jabir's like, Exoristos, you know, fighting isn't going to bring back that little girl. And she's like, what? And then a Velociraptor slashes her neck, and Al-Jabir pleads for Etrigan to fly down and save her. And she's like, all right, I guess she'd be useful in a fight, and as long as she's fighting to save the life of my beloved, I guess I can save her. So he does. We see Horsewoman approach this plane with all these horses behind her, but there are 3 giant dragons blocking the way. Mechanical dragons, mind you, so that's a thing. We got one page of basically the queen and the other guy, whatever his name is, basically looking at Vandal Savage being like, oh, this guy's an idiot, but, you know, maybe he could do something. If not, we'll just take over whenever it gets too bad. We're going to kill him, though, regardless. We are going to kill him. So, double crosses abound. So, at one point, once, you know, hellfire's raining from the skies, Xanadu comes up with the idea that whenever Etrigan and Jason Blood change places, not only do they change, their clothes change as well, which means that they are capable of bringing some things along with them during the change. So she asks Etrigan to talk to Jason, and they get a plan stewing there. So Horsewoman's got this like 3 pages here of like she's trying to get through, but then she falls off her horse, but then she gets back on it, and she just barely manages to squeak through, but her beloved horse that she rode for so long was sacrificed in the battle, and she had to switch to a different horse, like magically, because she can't get off of a horse. So, yeah. So anyway, once she makes it past the dragon, Shining Knight gets word that she made it through, and now they just have to wait for Albasarm's forces to come help. But of course, at that exact moment, the gate gets crashed through by all the soldiers, and the remaining demon knights who are there all ready their weapons and charge in, screaming, "For Camelot!" And that's where we leave off. I like this issue. It's just one big action issue, but instead of feeling like one big, just, oh, everyone's just fighting a general fight, everybody has their own specific thing going on. And that really breaks it up a lot more than just, okay, so-and-so is fighting unnamed soldier 1, so-and-so is fighting unnamed soldier 2, like whatever. Everyone has their own distinct problems, and they deal with it in their own distinct ways, and I like how that's dealt with. The art, same as it has been, fantastic, beautifully detailed while also coming out monthly. I can't even begin to understand what Diogenes Neves is on. So, yeah, no, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 7.5. I'm still very happy with it. There's only one issue left in this trade, so hopefully that will wrap up this little arc for the formation, and I am super excited to see how that happens next issue. Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E. number 6, written by Jeff Lemire, art by Alberto Ponticelli. We left off last issue with the crossover issue with OMAC. And at the very end, Frankenstein did not appreciate being used as a pawn in interdepartmental stratagems with Father Time. He's here to fight for the side of good and whatnot. This issue is pretty much, it's a new arc, and it pulls from everything that we've done so far. Like, it is just a full-on. So we open up, and Dr. Nina, whatever her last name is, the fish lady, she's giving Ray Palmer a tour of the rest of the facility, because I completely forgot he's a UN liaison. Like, he's supposed to be giving a report to the UN. So, yeah, he needs to be walked through this place. And they go through the humanid creation and, I don't know, destruction department? Sure. And basically they walk through like, okay, the humanids, they're like the workforce of our area here. They exist for only 24 hours. They're made of this green goop. And then after 24 hours, they go back into green goop. And then we recently discovered how to turn the green goop back into more of them. So we have an infinite supply of totally obedient slave people, more or less. And don't worry, there is 100% chance that they will never, ever, ever be sentient. They are never going to question their own humanity. And as they leave the room, one of them questions their own humanity and makes a run for it. Because of course he does. And we follow Frankenstein, Khalid, and the Wolfman and the vampire guy, creature commandos, making their way through a river in Vietnam. And they're basically asking, like, all right, Frankenstein, you brought us out here. What's going on? We don't even know the mission yet. And he's like, all right, this is top secret. Here's the deal. Back during the Vietnam War, we did Watchmen. And if you don't know what that means, apparently Frankenstein was there trying to win the war for the side of, like, the Allies, the good guys, quote unquote, America. And there was a Dr. Manhattan there. His name was Colonel Quantum, but he was literally just Dr. Manhattan. He was winning the war for them. But then one day they went into a diner, and Colonel Quantum was basically like, dude, I'm done. I'm not going out there again. I'm not going to kill anybody else, because this isn't good or bad. This is just killing for the sake of killing. Like, there isn't. And I'm not doing this anymore. And Frankenstein's like, oh, it's your duty, it's your whatever. And they fight for a brief second, but then Colonel Quantum just walks off into the woods and never comes back. And they trace his energy signature for a while, but it slowly got weaker and weaker and weaker. But just 2 weeks ago, a massive atomic wave went off, and it went out for a 50-mile radius and killed thousands of people. And they're like, all right, we're going to go there and we're going to deal with them. And the creature commanders are like, we're going to we're going to take him in. And he's like, no, we're here to assassinate him. And these guys were like war buddies. They were good friends, but regardless. So I'm going to get Lady Frankenstein walking around trying to find something to do because she's so bored with no gigs going on. We see that the thing that has given sentience to the humanids is actually Brother Eye from the last issue, the OMAC crossover issue, which is so surprising because I thought that was not going to ever come back. But yeah, so he's the one that awoke is going around spreading the good news of Brother Eye. So they arrive at his place. The creature commanders arrive at Colonel Quantum's place. They go in. They're expecting some level of a trap or something like that. But as they arrive, they just see an old, hobbled man who's got just these horrible deformities on him. And basically he's like, look, I wanted to come here and die. I am sick of the things that I did during that war, and I wanted to come here and die peacefully. But it's been 40 years, and I haven't died yet, and I don't feel like I ever will because of these powers. And he's like, well, then why did you kill all those people? You know I would come looking for you. And he's like, yeah, I did. Do you have a way to stop me? And Frankenstein pulls out a gun that was handed to him by Ray Palmer that has an anti-nuclear load that it'll cure him, it'll turn him back to human, but it'll also kill him. And Frankenstein double checks, are you sure you want me to use this? And he's like, yeah. So he fires off the shot, but then immediately he just grows to this massive side, crashing out of his little cabin. And Frankenstein and the rest of the creature commanders freak out for a second. They're like, oh, geez, this didn't go. We got to get ready to fight. But then Kelly's like, well, hold on, wait. And we see he shrinks back down. He turns into a normal human. He thanks Frankenstein for having it work, and then he just dies. And he's got a little butterfly motif going on. It's, beautiful. So anyway, the humans make their way into the zoo, which is like the jail for the ant farm, I guess, if that's what you call it. It's a miniaturized jail inside a miniaturized base of operations. And they're like, all right, well, no room for debate. Here we go. We're going to do it. So they open it up, and everyone's like, that's impossible. The codes to open this thing up are changed every 35 milliseconds. And they're like, well, somebody did. And those things are out. So Frankenstein and Nina lock and load and start making their way down the halls. Father Time calls Frankenstein, telling him he's got to get back here now to deal with this. Because inside of the zoo are the original creature commandos. And we see there's like a blob man and an invisible guy. And it's the ones that Nina mentioned in like issue 2. Like, this has all been seeded throughout everything we've done so far. And I'm so happy to see that. I really like this. I genuinely enjoy this issue because just even the B plot, I honestly think that the Colonel Quantum stuff is the B plot of this, because it seems like the A plot's what's going to cover over into next issue. The B plot is just touching in a beautiful way. You just see this butterfly motif going on. It's fantastic. The A plot's interesting because they seeded it for so long going into this. I'm down with all this, 100%. The art totally fits the style. Ponticelli's still on the same game that he has been this whole issue or whole series. I can't fault pretty much any of this. I'm going to go ahead and give this I'm giving this an 8 for right now, because it's just the introduction. We have yet to pay off anything. There's still some stumbling blocks that it could trip over, but in terms of setup, it's doing a fantastic job, and I am looking forward to reading what I hope is longer than just the one issue left in this trade, but I guess we'll see. Resurrection Man number 6, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, art by Fernando Dagnino. We left off last issue with Mitch coming back to life in the hands of a doctor who delivered him unto Arkham Asylum. So this issue picks up basically as a bottle episode. It all just takes place in Arkham. We don't deal with any of the side characters. It's just Mitch basically trying to convince these people to let him die so that he can prove what he's saying, which of course is an issue in a mental hospital. But regardless, we see, I think it's like a board who's like deciding his fate, or basically going down his assessment, and they're saying how he was brought in, he's said his name was Mitch Shelley. Apparently all the Mitch Shelleys in the U.S. are accounted for, which seems a bit strange to me, but whatever. He doesn't have any sort of fingerprints. And they think he might be a metahuman, but all they know for sure is that like he was leaping off of balconies trying to kill himself. So they have to put him under heavy dosage of drugs so that way he doesn't. What they don't know is that heavy dosage of drugs is not allowing him to focus enough to use his current power set, which is something to do with like electricity or something. So yeah, he's kind of screwed. Catch-22 here. We see him trying to break out of the grip of some guards, and then this larger guard named Fletcher comes in, and he tries to go after Mitch, and Mitch just leaps over the edge of one of the balconies, but of course there's a safety net there to catch him. So the board makes the conclusion that he has to be kept in his own separate section permanently under super heavy dosage of drugs, so that way he's not a threat to himself or others. And as he gets thrown into the cell, Fletcher, or is it Fletching? The fat one, whatever his name is, Fletcher. He basically threatens Mitch. He's not a good guard. He's not a good guy. And he's like, oh, you really want to keep this up? You're going to get thrown into the bin. That's where we keep the real messed up people. You want to spend the night with Scarecrow? Didn't think so. Shut up. So on a certain night here, they just show that the bat signal's going off. Like, it's in the sky, and everyone in Arkham can see it, so everyone's freaking out a little bit. Mitch is still just trying to concentrate and figure out what he can do, and he realizes he has to do something drastic in order to get someone to kill him. So the next day, getting lunch, someone hands the bowl of steaming hot oatmeal to him, and he's like, too hot, and he throws it in the guy's face, and then just starts like a prison fight. Fletcher knocks him out, and he's like, all right, well, you're going to the bin. We're putting you in with the other loonies. Let's see how you like it down here. And it takes a day or so, but when they put you down here, apparently they don't give you your meds. So he's finally able to start thinking straight. And we see who I can only assume is a villain I'm just not familiar with, named Sumo, has essentially bribed Fletcher into giving a free pass for him to escape. Like he's gonna pull the lever and cause a mass breakout so that Sumo's able to escape. So Fletcher does so. Everyone starts running out, and Shelley, of course, with his own morality, is like, "Oh, this is what you do, Fletcher. This is how you make your extra money. How dare you?" And he attacks Sumo with his lightning abilities that he now is able to control. And Fletcher manages to hit him with a nightclub in the back of the head and seemingly knock him out. There's quite a bit of blood, but as Fletcher's telling Sumo, okay, hey, you paid me to get you out. Let's get you out. And Sumo's like, not yet. He picks up Mitch and snaps his neck and then starts making his way out. At that point, the cops show up. They start swarming all over the place. Fletcher's trying to lead Sumo to safety. But then Mitch gets up, now fucking ripped. And he picks Sumo up and he's like, oh, you're not going anywhere. I got you for 3 minutes. And he just beats the crap out of Sumo. And as the cops turn the corner, he holds Sumo above his head. He's like, don't shoot. I have him asleep. He's down. And Gordon's like, all right, everyone, don't shoot. Don't shoot. He's good. And as he's saying that, a shot fires off and shoots Mitch in the head. Gordon freaks out. He's like, who fired that? And of course it was Fletcher. He makes the excuse that he thought he saw a weapon and he was just protecting himself. Gordon is, of course, pissed, but there's no way that he could prove otherwise. And later on the next day, Gordon makes a trip down to the morgue just to see who this guy was. And as they get into the room where he's being operated on, of course, no one's there. He's made his way out. Then we see that Fletcher got medical leave with a full day, or full pay and workers' comp. And he's just got a trip to the Bahamas planned. He's living the sweet life, especially because he made it out with his extra money. But then we see flames start spewing next to his door. And in busts Mitch, now with some weird firepower going on. And he comes in and he basically acts like the spirit of vengeance. And he causes this blinding light. And basically a tenement fire breaks out exactly where he was. But once they get up onto the roof, they see Fletcher tied up there in the straitjacket that he tried to pin on Mitch earlier. And he's just freaking out, just yelling like, oh, he can't die. You got to protect me. He can't die. So now he seems like the crazy guy. Also, there's this little recurring thing of flames coming out of the roof looking like a bat. Like, Batman's not in this, but they are in Gotham. I don't know if that's supposed to be a motif, but it's there. So if that comes back up, I enjoyed this issue. For being a bottle issue, it's definitely something that is well done. Like, I'm usually not a fan of things where it's just, okay, let's stop the story entirely and then just go do something else. And yeah, I do enjoy the mysteries a lot more than I enjoy this. But in terms of it just being its own independent thing, I like the concept of, here's a guy who all they have to do is kill him. And it seems like it's so easy in the superhero universe to die if you're just a normal person. But then once this guy actually wants to, you see just how difficult it is, especially in a place like Arkham that is designed at trying to keep you safe technically. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting diversion, and I'm liking how they handled it. I'm hoping we get back to the main plot soon with the mysteries and the angels and all those people. But regardless, I'm down with the short little diversion just to have some fun. So overall, I'm going to give this one a 7.5. I very much enjoyed it. I would highly suggest checking out Resurrection Man as a whole. I think there's still one more issue in this trade, but as it stands, it's very good. So yeah, check it out if you get the chance. Huntress number 5, written by Paul Levitz, art by Marcus Toe, whatever. Last issue we left off with Huntress finally getting Moretti, putting him up to the police at the very least. This issue, she is taking care of the dictator that is trying to seek asylum in Italy. And this entire issue is pretty much a single heist. Like, I know most issues are just her breaking into somewhere and doing something, but this is just one night. The whole thing's already been planned out, and she's just going in to get the guy and deal with it now. So starts off, she's got a speedboat laced with explosives. She has it auto set to drive up to the pier, and once it gets close enough, still out of the range of major danger, but close enough to cause a ruckus, she explodes it, giant fireball out in the pier, and of course everyone is running to go look at that. She, however, is dressed up in little old maid outfit, and she makes her way towards the door of the place where they are being held. And there's still a soldier standing guard, but she just rubs a mop in his face, and he's just like, fine, geez, get in there. So she runs up, changes into her huntress gear, and then we cut to the dictator who's talking to his son, who's just like, I don't trust any of these Italian soldiers to protect us up here. So that's why I've got my own men coming. And he sends his son out to go and check the villa that has been prepared for him. But he's going to stay here and basically just torture this woman who he has here. I think her name was Layla. So, yeah. We see that the two, again, I think they're reporters because they said they write about stuff. So, yeah, I think they're reporters. The two reporters that have been helping out Helena this whole time basically are like, this is kind of crazy, but, it's what we want. We want justice. We've written about it for so long, so here's to hoping she can do it. And, they clink their glasses, and as soon as they do, there's an explosion out from the top of where the guy's being held. So we see Helena breaking in. There's a first line of guards outside one of the doors. She throws in a gas grenade. One of the guys has a gun that she didn't notice, but she knocks it out of his hand with her crossbow and then just goes full on ham, knocking the rest of them out when they try to fight her until the gas takes its effect. Then she breaks into the next level, throws in another gas grenade, presumably does the same thing. And we see the dictator talking to his personal henchmen, including that really big buff guy from 2 issues ago that nearly got the drop on Huntress. They're all here, and he's like, all right, so I'm going to go down into my safe room. You guys can come and get me once you have her, because of course she's going to be coming for me. But don't make sure she doesn't get to me. Okay, bye. And one of the guys is just like, hey, what about that girl you were with? And we see he's like, oh, she ceased to amuse me, as we see her dead body just lying behind one of the nearby hallways. And it's like, okay, just in case you had any reservations about this guy not being the worst, here you go. So we see that she's looking at the heat signatures through a door with some special tech, and she notices the one going down to the safe room. She's like, all right, well, that's probably my target, but I got to take out these guys first. So she puts on the gas mask again, pulls out a plug from her belt and then kicks in the door, throws in the gas grenade. Immediately the big guy grabs it. It lands on the couch, and then the big guy literally throws the couch out through the window so that way it doesn't affect them anymore. And Elena's like, okay, all right. There were still a couple guys that, were in the immediate vicinity, but yeah, for the most part, it's just Helena versus the big guy. The rest of them are all incapacitated. And she flips the guy, taking out a couple of the smaller goons, and then as soon as her back is turned, the big guy's already on her again, got his hands around her neck, and he's like, we already fought. I know all your tricks. There's nothing you can do. It's just me and you, and soon it'll only be me. And then she pulls out that plug, plugs it into a socket in the wall, and then takes 2 electrodes and jams it into his neck and just knocks him out. And immediately she looks to any of the remaining guys, and she's like, anybody else want to go? And they're like, no, you're good. You can do whatever you want. Goodbye. So there's a knock on the safe room door. Dictator opens it up, and she just punches him, knocks him down. And he's like, fine, take me to the police. There's no way the world court's ever going to indict me after the stuff you've done tonight. And she's like, you think I'm here for law? No. The law never mattered when you were trafficking those women. The law never mattered when you killed that woman earlier tonight. No, I'm not here for the law. I'm here for justice. And she shoots him in the head. And we only get one panel of epilogue, if you want to call it that, where it's the son that left at the beginning. We see him looking at the TV with the body being carried out, and he just says, Father, ... And that leads into the final issue of this mini. I'm okay with it. I kind of wish that would have been the final fight, because that just seems like a final fight. Maybe they could do more afterwards. Maybe they can up the ante. If they can, great. I'm all for it. But that seemed like, Moretti seemed like the big deal, and they got rid of him last issue. But the only other major deal they were building up was this guy who Moretti was essentially working for. But now they've wrapped him up, and we still have one more issue. So I personally, just from a storytelling perspective, I kind of wish this would have waited until next issue, but I trust the writer well enough that I think this will still have a satisfying ending. I'm hoping, at least. I'm hoping they didn't just blow it too soon. Of course, it'll all be revealed that issue. This issue, however, it's very fine. I just wish it would have been issue 6. That's all I'm saying. It's a nice little action scene. I think that I could have done with a little bit more action, if that makes more sense, because all it really went down to up until that final room is she opens a door, she throws in some gas, they fight for a little bit, half a page, but then everyone's out because of the gas. And I get, that's probably the safer option in a fight, but it doesn't make for good action scenes. So anyway, I like it. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 7. I think that this miniseries has been very well done, hitting on some actual real points in a fantastical manner, but these are real sorts of criminals. So yeah, no, I'm enjoying it, and I'm hoping that it can stick the landing on the last issue. Penguin, Pain and Prejudice number 5, written by Greg Hurwitz, art by Simon Kudransky. We left off last issue with a mechanical bird robot being sent by Cobblepot to terrorize this school, and Batman catches on to Penguin but can't prove it yet. Meanwhile, Penguin has an entire army of these mechanical robot drone things. Full disclosure, I completely blanked that this was 5 issues long. This is the last issue. I got to the end, I was like, oh, we're done. I thought it was 6, but regardless, here we are. So this issue picks up. Cassandra and Penguin are having dinner, and Cassandra's basically just letting out, hey, you seem really distracted about something, and if you're sick of me, I get it, but I hope that's not the case. And she takes off her sunglasses, letting Penguin see her eyes, and Penguin's like, you're absolutely beautiful. I love the fact that you're different, that you have these imperfections. Don't ever think that I'm sick of you. And Cassandra reaches out wanting to touch Penguin's face, and he's like, no, not yet. soon. But he hands over the snow globe that he gave to his mother all those years ago. And basically he starts off being nice, but then he just rails. He's just like, I wanted to give you so much more. When they took that ring, they were laughing at us. They're still laughing. And Cassandra's like, I'm just happy being here with just us. Like, we don't need these things. And Penguin just doesn't answer. He's just lost in thought. And Cassandra tries to get his attention, but he's like, yeah, I think I want to go play my game some more. So then we see all these hatches open up, and one by one, these Penguin rockets just take to the skies. And Batman makes a call over to Gordon saying, like, hey, there's a threat coming from everywhere. And we see all over Gotham just these mechanical birds these normal birds following the rockets, flying through windows, terrorizing everybody. They appear to target kids, but, anybody who's caught in the path is getting terrorized here. And we see Penguin just sitting in his bedroom. Cassandra's on the bed behind him, and she's like, you can turn up the volume if you want. And he's like, no, I don't want to disturb you. So Batman calls up Gordon, and he's like, hey, I'm going to take it out. And he's like, what are you going to do, crash land all of them? He's like, no, I'm going to crash land the controller. So he goes to Penguin's base, blows open the wall to get in there, and Penguin's alarms, of course, go off. He's like, oh, son of a bitch. So he grabs Cassandra, and he tells her, like, we have to go. We have to hide. He's here. He's coming for us. And she's like, who? And he's like, him. And then it's just a whole scene of Cobblepot making his way deeper into his fortress, into his, safes and whatever, and Batman being just one step behind, taking out all of the guards and all the security measures and whatnot immediately after he, passes by him. And at one point, he goes into a closet with Cassandra, but he's moving too quickly. She can't see, obviously, and she trips over something. And in her stumbling, she finally touches the Penguin's face and gets, a good feel of it. And she gasps, and Penguin stabs her. He's just this look of rage on his face as she gasps. And he stabs her, and she mumbles something under her breath. And he's like, what? What are you saying about me? Go ahead, say it. And her dying words are, I was right, you are so handsome. And Penguin's just left sitting there. We see the birds are still terrorizing people because now Penguin has absolutely nothing to lose here. Batman comes up. He opens the final door. Penguin uses one of his rocket exploding gun umbrellas, whatever you want to call it. And Batman takes cover. Penguin moves a bit deeper. He tries to escape on a boat, but Batman gets him. Just straight up, Batman gets him. And during the fight, as they are swinging at each other, Penguin's thrown to the ground, and the snow globe that Cassandra still had with her falls and lands and crashes right next to Penguin's face. And that's pretty much it. All the rockets deactivate, they all fall out of the sky, and we get one page here of him sitting in Blackgate Penitentiary. The guards are making fun of him for all the crap that he's been put through over these past 5 issues by Batman. And it's like, yeah, well, you'll have a lot of time to think about it, Penguin. Ha 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 ha, as they walk off laughing at him. But then we see that he had another one of those little microcontrollers underneath his bench in Blackgate, and sitting outside the prison seems to be a robot that he made specifically with the purpose of breaking him out, because it has a bandsaw on one of its arms. So get to the end, and that's it. I very much enjoyed this comic. Just this whole series has been fantastic. I can't believe that this isn't one that people laud a lot more. I know it's Penguin and it's not the biggest character in Batman's Rogues Gallery, but it's such a interesting look at it, of giving him just this horribly tragic backstory, but you also know he's irredeemable. There's no way he's coming out of this as the good guy. You know he does these bad things, but it's interesting to see the reasons he does this bad thing. There are no saints in this story, except Cassandra, and look what happened to her. So, yeah, no, I cannot recommend this anymore. The art is always fantastic, especially the looks on Penguin's face whenever like he's caught off guard. Like you feel that. You see that in him. It's always fantastic. Top marks to both the artist and the writer. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 9, just because maybe the issue itself doesn't deserve it, being mostly an extended fight scene. I think I probably should have rated like the flashback issue of Penguin's life probably a little bit higher, but the 9 represents the series overall, and this capping it off, I definitely would suggest checking it out if you have not. And that's it. That's all the comics came out from DC Comics this February 8th, 2012. And as I said at the start of this episode, I talk too darn much, so I'm just going to speed through the contractual obligations section. So, next week, February 15th, 2012, we got 13 comics coming out, including the number 6 issues of Batman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern Corps, Captain Atom, DC Universe Presents, Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, and Legion of Superheroes. Additionally, we have the number 5 issue of the anthology series My Greatest Adventure, the series that I just don't seem to understand half of. Anyway, if you have any thoughts on those comics I just listed off, the comics I just talked about for an hour and a half, or any comic coming up at any point in the future, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at DC Comics Podcast. That is at DC Comics Podcast. Use the hashtag RuPaul Drag Race, just because I really want to try to get the other people on that Twitter super confused about what's going on this show. Additionally, we have a Patreon that you can pay for. You don't get anything special from me because I'm a lazy bum, but you do get special things from other members of the Mild Fuzz Network, and that can be found at Mild Fuzz TV for as low as $1, all one word, Mild Fuzz TV. But that's it for me. I'm going to go ahead and edit this, slap it up, hopefully get a little bit of endorphins whenever I see that view counter go ding, and yeah, that'll do it. So always remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.